social chat. So, good afternoon. Welcome to our research seminar. Today the presentation will be given by Dagmara, Celik, Katreniak. Dagmara is a research fellow at the Center for Institutional Studies, School of Economics, and she's also finishing her PhD at the Surge ERI in Prague, Czech Republic. So, please, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all for coming to my presentation. I hope I will have more positive effect on you compared to the weather today that made us rather sleepy. I'm going to talk about my project or experiment that I implemented in Uganda. It's entitled Social Comparison, Incentives and Motives to Learn, a field experiment in Uganda. I'm going to first present my research question, motivation, why I found this interesting to study. Then I will introduce you the design, and then I will come to results. Please, all your comments, suggestions, recommendations are more than welcome. I'll be very happy to discuss your questions with you. So according to psychology, there is a concept called social comparison theory. And according to this theory, it is important for all of us to know where we are standing, like what is compared to other people around us. So we need to know sort of our relative standing in order to exert correct amount of effort. In economics, there were experiments on the similar topic, providing people with feedback about how they are doing compared to other people. Most of them were done in the firm environment. So imagine that they were given information about how much did they produce or how much work have they done compared to other workers, and they study the effect on the overall performance after receiving this information. And the results are sort of mixed. For example, Asmat and Iriberi, they found positive effect of this feedback on people's performance. Erickson et al., they found no effect of this feedback, and Bandiera 2011, they found actually negative impact of this feedback on people's performance at work. The closest study in education is the study of I forgot the name, Andrabi et al. Sorry. So they distributed feedback to students in Pakistan. They distributed feedback to parents and the headmasters of students in Pakistan, and they found out that actually just this particular feedback actually led to 0.1 standard deviation improvement in students' performance. In educational literature, 0.1 standard deviation is something like small, rather, or moderate effect. So we can consider feedback to be like sort of incentive in order to improve performance. There are other incentives that have been studied, and most of them are in terms of rewards, financial rewards or reputational rewards. And the closest study, I'm going to touch all these questions. That's why I'm talking about this. Like all of these incentives I'm going to study in my research. If we look at the evidence, like what are the effects of financial rewards on students' performance, the closest paper is by Blimpo 2014, who gave students in Benin financial rewards, and he observed whether it's going to in either competitive, less or more competitive environment, and actually he found out that yes, financial rewards lead to improvements of 0.3 on average standard deviation, which is quite a good, strong effect in educational literature. He didn't talk about any other rewards, but for example, Neckermann and Kosfeld, they measured the effect of just pure symbolic effect rewards on performance of people, and they found that just giving students congratulatory card from the NGO for them, they were voluntarily doing some work, actually improved their performance at work as well. So what I wanted to say here, there are many incentives that have been studied, and these incentives may or may not lead to performance of people, and all these incentives I'm going to study in my research. So the research questions are: can feedback motivate students to improve their performance? Can additional introduction of rewards lead to improvement in students' performance? And what is more important, if you have combination of those two treatments, if I receive both feedback and rewards, what is more important for me? Is it the information or is it the reward itself? And then I'm going to study how these effects differ. I will study heterogeneity of the effects, and it could be studied by gender, by age, by school level, by area and group composition. And then I'm studying what are these effects of these incentives on other than learning outcomes. And this is something unique, because usually we study how our performance is improving in math and English, for example. But I'm not going to present it today, but this study allows me to also touch the question how other outcomes such as aspiration, stress, happiness, or overconfidence, how these outcomes are influenced by these incentivized treatments. So how did I proceed with all these experiments? So it is a randomized control trial. So I divided my whole sample into treatments and control groups. I did it randomly by random generating number. So those groups should be on average the same at the beginning. Such setup allows me, if I observe them over time, the difference between the outcome of the treatment group and control group should be really just because of the treatment, because at the beginning they are the same. In order to make it more balanced, I did first stratification. It means that I divided the whole sample into 8 small groups by area and by whether the school was better performing or worse performing in national examinations. Okay, so I knew that there are 2 dimensions, how schools in my sample differed. Either the school was closer to Kampala, so they usually are richer, and of course they are going to have different conditions even in schools, or they're very remote areas. So this is why I divided it by area, and then I divided by how the school was on average performing, either better or worse performing. Within each cell, I randomized the sample into treatment and into control. Okay, so that's how I divided the sample. Who is going to receive the treatment? At the beginning, I only disseminated information, this feedback treatments. Okay, so imagine that. So I have 2 treatments and 1 control. Treatment 1. Imagine that we are a group of students, and I divided us into groups of 3 to 4 students, and then I evaluated you as groups over the academic year, and I told you whether you improved or whether you decreased your performance, and I told you where you are standing in the class distribution. Okay, so this is treatment 1, and I'm going to call it like small feedback group. Okay, the second one is treatment where I considered us as one group, and I compared us to other classes in the district. Okay, so the difference between treatment 1, like small feedback group, and big feedback group is that in the small feedback group, I am together with 2 or 3 people, and I know their performance. I know how much they contributed to our average score, because the small information I gave them contained the information of all members of the group, how we were really doing. Okay, so there is some sort of monitoring inside of the group. While in the big feedback group, I provided you how we as a group were doing, and since classes were sometimes of 100 kids, I didn't really provide them with information how all the classmates were doing. So there the monitoring effect is disappears. Okay, so this is the difference between those 2 feedback groups. And then I have a control group. I just came to the class and I just gave them math and English tests, and I did not give them any feedback.
Clarification question. So in the treatment 1, in each group, every student knows how the other students in the same group perform.
Yes.
But they also know that their relative standing as a group.
Yes.
How the group average fares, like compares to the other groups.
So you can imagine that this is the feedback card I give you, and this is going to be treatment 1, and I give you a graph of all the groups from the best to the poorest one, and I tell you, okay, you are here, And then students had information, they were, let's say there were 3, A, B, and C, and how many points they get from math, from English, and the average. So they knew every single information about how they scored as a group, and over time there was a column whether they increased their performance or decreased, even to emphasize their performance. But this is treatment 1. And treatment 2, what they got was again similar picture, how their class was doing compared to other classes, but they only had their name here, how they scored in math and English, and then average. So they knew whether they are above or below average, but they didn't know how other students in the class were doing. Okay? Because, like, as I said, it was not possible to give them all information.
But here we are comparing classes within the same school?
Across other schools, because it was randomized on the school level in order, so it cannot be that within one school you have both control and treatment. That I wanted to eliminate due to information spillover effects. And then yes, you could have treatment 1 and treatment 2 within one school, but it would not be at the same level, because they always have like one P6, like one 6th graders, one class of 7th graders. So at each level there was always only one, either treatment 1 or treatment 2. So, and this is the timeline. So feedback, small and big feedbacks were given to students repeatedly. And so at the beginning of the school year, I came and I just gave them exam, math and English. This is my baseline, right? This is like where we start. Then I randomized them into treatment and control. And then I came for the second time, and to those who had this small feedback, I gave them their feedback, explained them what information they should receive. Then they wrote math and English exams. Treatment 2, unfortunately, this is something that is a drawback of my experiment, is that we did not have capacity to correct all the whole number of those exams. So they had to wait one round. There was one round delay. So we are talking about approximately 6,000 students, and we were going every day from Monday till Friday to the field. So afterwards we had that much of like those exams to be evaluated, and we simply didn't have time. So that's why there is one round delay. So, and here I just gave them exam. Then I came the third time. Again, I gave them math and English exams, and to those who were supposed to get feedback, they got feedback. Nothing else, just feedback. Then I came for the fourth time. I repeated the same. Math, English, and feedback, math, and English, okay? Accompanied by some questionnaires, but I'm leaving this for later. And then after testing round 4, when every exam was written, I went to school one more time, and I distributed posters to all the students, and I told them, okay, I re-randomized the sample orthogonally, meaning that I took each row here and I divided into 1/3, and I introduced reward scheme, okay? So 1/3, overall 1/3 of students were offered financial rewards, 1/3 of students were offered reputational rewards, and 1/3 of students were left without any reward. So I still have pure control, and I have actually all combination of all the treatments, okay? Small feedback, financial reward. Small feedback, reputational reward, pure small feedback, okay? So this setup, such setup is allowing me to study first pure effects of all the treatments separately, but also the interaction of all effects, okay?
What's the duration from round 1 until the end?
It's actually 10 months.
10 months.
We started at the end of January, and we carried the research like mid-October. Then afterwards, I wanted to do one more testing round, but they had national examination. They didn't allow me. So I would just be able to go to some few schools, and I just avoided that. So altogether, we are talking about 5,000 students repeatedly examined and questioned or interviewed. And those students are from primary schools and secondary schools. In primary schools, I took P6 and P7. They have all 7 years in total. So when you're in P7, you're going to do national examination. And if you pass, you can actually apply to the secondary school. And then in secondary schools, I took senior 1, 2, 3, and 4. And in senior 4, they again take national examination to go to either second part of the secondary school, or to go to, or to drop, or to go to some colleges that they can continue. And all experiment took place in southern Uganda. This orthogonal treatment, if I talk about financial rewards, it's actually providing students with 2,000 Ugandan shillings if they were among 15% of the best performing and 15% of the most improving groups. And if I talk about reputational rewards, again, it's about 15% best performing and 15% most improving. Those names of those students who win were published in local newspapers, Bukede, that are widely spread in the area. And then, of course, I had this no reward group as well.
So you're rewarding based on group performance, not individual performance?
Yes. And that's a drawback to some extent of my study. I mean, now when I analyze the data, I realized that it would be great if I had one more treatment that would not be group, but it would be individual. But based on time, monetary, and also like sample size constraint, I could have only like those 2 treatments, and I decided to go for small and big feedback groups. Yes, I would reconsider if I do the experiment again, but I do not have pure individual treatment. So I hope that now the design is sort of like clear, and I would like to introduce you with the results. So at the beginning, I have to tell you whether the randomization was successful. That's how usually field experimental people should start. So it means I should provide you with information whether in all dimensions, all observables that I have, division into treatment and control group resulted in groups on average the same. If I look in the paper that I distributed, if you look, there's a big table where I provided, like, for every single question from the questionnaire, that treatment and control people really responded on average the same. So there's not significant difference between the way they answer the question in the baseline survey. There's no significant difference between math and English, but what I see, and this is where this is going to be crucial, there are differences in the way how people are treated from treatment and from the control group. And that is called non-random attrition, because it is a systematic difference in ways how people from treatment are treated compared to control. So what I can see is, this is a small feedback group. People in small feedback groups had 10% lower probability to drop out. Okay? I should say attrit, because I'm not really sure whether they really dropped out from school or they just hit themselves in latrines, okay? But I know whether they sat in our examination or they didn't sit in our examination. So that's why I should say attrition. Across class, this is the big feedback group. Those students had 11% lower probability to attrit. Financial rewards are 12.2% and reputational was 12.6%. And also there is some systematic difference in terms of always comers. Those are people who were present in all 5 testing rounds. And you can see that those who were receiving feedback had higher probability to be present during all our visits. By 12%, 10% if it's a big feedback group, 12% again, financial rewards and reputational rewards, so like 3.4, this is not significant, but it was still 3.4%. And this may or may not be a problem in the analysis of the treatment effects. It would be a problem if really systematically different people actually stayed in the sample, right? If this would actually mean that I reintroduce selection bias that was taken care by randomization at the beginning? Well, at least for the treatment 1 and treatment 2, I can show you the graphs. These are the kernel densities that, yes, students from treatment 1 were slightly poorer in terms of their performance. That's why that the distribution is shifted a little bit leftwards. And treatment 2 and control, those are the blue and green lines, are approximately the same. So I could say by this is math performance, this is English performance. So there are slight differences between who were the dropouts. From treatment 1, it seems that poor performing students were dropping out more frequently, which would mean that actually better students would stay in the sample, and then it would mean that, well, I may have bias in my OLS results. But when I look into these are how treatment and control differed at the beginning after randomization, so you can see that there are no significant differences, they are approximately the same. And these are people who stayed after the 5th round, like who were present during the last testing round, based on their initial performance for math and English. And you can see that they are, again, not significantly different. How is it possible? So there are two things. Like first, more people are dropping out from control, and second, less from treatment, but they are worse. And it can be shown that actually this is possible, that even I have different dropout from the treatment group, it results actually on having those 3 groups on average the same after the dropout. So what I wanted to say by this is that no matter like how this table, what this table tells you, I mean, we are talking about 10%, meaning like 500 students out of 5,000. So it could be also the question that the number is relatively small. But these are this is a test differences in distributions, and you can see that the differences for the baseline people who were present at the very beginning and those who were present at the end, they're not significantly different. Okay, so what I'm going to say that at least for treatment 1 and treatment 2, this attrition didn't result in a introduction of the selection bias. The different question a little bit is when I look into the, like once those rewards were introduced. Okay, you can see that this distribution, all of the sum, this is like all 9 or 8 interaction of all treatments, and you can see that there are already differences. And this is in math, and this is in English. If I test, some of them are statistically different, some of them are insignificant. So what I can do, I will keep this in mind. I will first provide you with OLS results, and then I will try to persuade you that even if I do some more other specifications, the results remain the same. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do further. So if we look at, finally we are at the results stage. So if we look how those treatments affected students' performance in math and English, you can see that graphically, so these are the size in standard deviation, so I standardize all the test scores with respect to the control group at the beginning in order to, so that I'm able to compare the effect sizes to other studies. And these are standard errors. So you can see that the effect of feedback, when we talk about overall effect of the feedback, there is approximately 0.1 standard deviation improvement in both math and English. So if I provided students with feedback, the small one within class comparison, it resulted in improvement in performance. If we talk about English, there is no effect. Okay? And this is going to be something that is persistent if I do in all other results. And I will tell you some intuition, and you can please argue with me if it's maybe correct or you find it correct or not. So, unfortunate thing number 2 of my design was that I did not randomize this, the way how I tested kids. I always gave math as the first one and English as the second one. So there is a definitely, according to my opinion, order effect. Okay? But order effect is present when only in the feedback treatments. Okay? These are the effects of rewards, and you can see that financial rewards and reputational rewards in math and in English led to significant improvement, and the size is approximately 0.12 to 0.14 standard deviation. Okay? But here the effect is persistent. So my interpretation is that when you receive feedback, you build your expectations about how you're going to score in the examination, but then you face reality, which was always mathematics, and then you actually sort of get disappointed because you may expect that, well, I screwed the exam, and then you do not really give you do not put any effort into the English. I claim this because I see this persistent result in all other results that I'm going to show you. And in the rewards seem to have more persistent effects. So if you promise to kids you're going to be rewarded at the end, they will try in both math and English because it's a different channel how they are motivated. These are in numbers if you would like to see, but that's exactly what I told you. Now, since I introduced this interaction of all the treatments, I can actually disseminate what is the main source, what drives it more. So when I take the result all together, you can see that pure information does not really play a role, but it is always the information that is combined with rewards. That is in line with the social comparison theory, right? Because you need to know first where you are in order to exert the right amount of effort, okay? And it would lead, again, there are results in math and in English only. Now we can see only if financial rewards are present. Reputational rewards are always going to be slightly significant or slightly insignificant. So this is when it's overall. But now my question was, okay, how do girls differ in terms of their responses compared to boys? Because we know, for example, in Western that girls usually shy, they do not like the competition. So they shy away, as the title of their paper even suggests. And you can see that the differences by gender also matter. So first, again, I have here typo, this is rewards, okay? Last two are rewards, first two are the effects of the feedback. So again, you can see that feedback matters, but for girls only. And then it goes away. But money matters, mostly for boys, and rewards, mostly for boys, and it is persistent. Okay? And again, I'm saying, I think this is the first thing, effect, short-lasting effect can be explained that girls simply try to, they build their expectation, and afterwards simply they do not think that they will achieve their goal, and the effort is going to be much lower when writing the English examination. I will have the data to support or to destroy this sort of my arguments, because I will have data on effort. Of course, it's a subjective measure, but I will have the data very soon, so I will be able to give some sort of update to those who would be interested. But I do not have it at the moment. And so we can see that in like boys, these are girls. These first two, it's completely insignificant in math, but boys react to the financial and reputational rewards. Here in English, there was slight effect on girls as well. If we would like to see what is driving the results, these are the interaction of all the treatments, and you can see again that it's first mathematics girls and boys, second English girls and boys, and you can again see that pure feedback first has positive result, and then it even goes away, so it even demotivates them to perform in English. For boys, it's similar here. And then financial rewards, there are no effect for girls, and here we have interaction of the feedback as on the reward treatments. But what I would like to show you here is that if we take girls, so those who were receiving feedback only, from the beginning, additional introduction of rewards doesn't lead to significant improvement. But if they had financial rewards from the beginning or reputational rewards from the beginning, introducing information plays a key role. Okay, so for girls, simply this feedback matters. For boys, feedback does not matter. Where we are. Introduction, like here, if they receive some reward, feedback does not matter as additional treatment. But if they had just treatment at the beginning, introduction of rewards plays a role. And mostly it's shown as if they receive the very big group feedback. So my interpretation would be girls, they care more about how they are doing and what is like perception of them in their approximate circles, while boys are more materialistic and they think really about rewards only. That would be my interpretation, but of course. And then I actually looked at how those effects differ by the school level, because of course I expected that those students who are in primary school, to give you some background information, in Uganda they have universal education for all, which was introduced some 10 years or so ago. And it means that every child can go to primary school supposedly without paying school fees, and the child should be accepted in public schools. Before it was not the case. Before they had to pay official fees, and only selected kids were usually going to schools. So definitely students in primary schools are of different nature compared to those selected already in the secondary school. So I wanted to see how those effects differ. If we look at the effects of girls, you can see that this is the small feedback, and these are the big feedback. These are primary, secondary school, primary, secondary. So the small feedback, it doesn't matter whether they're in primary or secondary school, it simply plays the role. Here, it seems that the big feedback plays role only in the secondary school. Again, rewards are usually not motivating them to improve their performance, just financial rewards on the primary school, which would be, again, something what I expected. In primary school, the power of those financial rewards is going to be much stronger to motivate them, because they are usually of poor backgrounds. Okay, so 2,000 shillings, you can imagine that it's like here, lunch in the canteen. For them, it's like a really, really good lunch, big one. Or it means for them like 5 pencils, something that they can buy from 2,000 shillings. And it's something for small primary school kids as a big amount of money. But the secondary school, they have to pay fees of like 80 to sometimes 300,000 Ugandan shillings to enter the school. So, you know, the measure differs. So that's what we can see here as well. And in boys, the only effect that is the financial, if we talk about financial rewards, the only effect can be seen again in primary schools, which is again in line of what I just told you, that the value of this 2,000 shilling matters in primary versus secondary school. And then I was also interested in, so the advantage of running such experiment in Uganda is that you have a nice heterogeneity within the class as well. So here or anywhere else in more developed environments, you usually have kids of the same or similar age within one level. There, the average difference, the range, is 7 years. So if I am a 6th grader, I can sit with a kid who is 11 years old all the way up to 18 years old. That's the average. I also had a 51-year-old guy in this senior 2 class, and he actually had 2 kids in the primary. He wanted to be a good role model for them. So, but that's an outlier, and I do not really consider him. So I was really interested, like, how those effects differ if I talk about students who are in line, who are in their official age, and who are repeating the classes and who interrupted their studies, and they're 18 and they're still in P6. Okay? So I created a measure that I divided the sample and measured the effects on those who are, if I'm a P6 student, I'm supposed to be 11 or 12. So those are students that I call official age. And all others, mostly older students, are the other ones. So I call them older. Okay? And you can see that the pattern is similar in a way of like what's really led to improvement or what not. But the sizes are usually smaller for those who are older. So those who are in time studying, usually the effects are bigger. We can talk that yes, probably they are better because they do not repeat the classes. They are from better backgrounds because they were not pushed to stay outside from school for 2, 3, 4 years and so on. I have data on their backgrounds, or at least like 70% of them, and I may check whether this is what is behind these sort of differences, but I do not have the data at the moment. I was just interested like how it differs. And these are English by official age or by unofficial, like I'm just thinking where did okay, so this is this is in mathematics overall effect, and this is in English. So in English we can see again that the effects on the older students are slightly lower. Yeah, definitely this would not be statistically difference, but if we are reaching the reputational reward, then it would be. There are also differences like how the effects there are differences in how these treatments led to improvements when we look at the initial sort of like performance. So I divided the sample into 4 quartiles based on math and English, how they were doing at the beginning, so that I could see whether poor performing students respond to those treatments more or less. There are limits to interpret these results, because imagine that I have 53 schools, 145 classes, so I cluster at the class size, and if I divide it like this, and girls and boys, I have very limited amount of clusters. It's like 12 to 13 clusters, and we know that there's a problem of inference if we have small amount of clusters. So, but I would say that results at least show that more effect was on those that are higher performing compared to those from the below median group, which is usually seen in the experimental literature, that you usually motivate those who are close to be the best ones, because they have sort of motivation to fight with the best performing students, while usually those who are poor performing, they do not really react to treatments. But yeah. So there are issues, as I started, and I already discussed some issues of this experiment, and I wanted to dedicate like last few minutes on the issues and how I treat them. So first, there are these imbalances between treatment and control groups with respect to the baseline characteristic. So how I treat it is that I compare OLS result to 3 different measures of imputation methods. So what I do is that first, so imagine that in the round 5, I have missing observations, right, of those people who dropped. So what I do, I try to find ways how to impute their scores so that it makes sense. So one measure is that I look at their, and remember that I repeatedly tested those students. So I have like 5 different testing rounds, okay? So I look always to the last available test score of this particular person, and then I just simply, in the measure 1, I simply adjust for the difficulty of the exam between those 2 testing rounds by, I call it median ratio. Okay, so there is some like ratio, median score of the round 5 compared to median score of the round where the student was available at the last time. So I adjust for the difficulty. That's measure 1. Measure 2 is that I look at the percentile where the student was in the whole distribution of the treatment, and I assigned to the student who has missing a score there the same score that other person with the same percentile has from the fifth testing round. Okay, and then the third measure is that I do the same but for all within the classes. So I look where I am standing during my last available observation in my class, and then I assign this missing value as the one that is equal to the score of the person who sat in the last testing round but has the same percentile rank. Okay, so that's how I found it. I could impute those results, and I can show you. I will show you in the next slide that results are very similar. Okay, so I think that these imbalances that I showed you at the very beginning do not really play the role. Then another issue is that if I talked about these reputational rewards, there were two schools where randomization told me to go and give them these rewards. These were only reputational rewards, but I failed. There was no time, because when we came there, they had some official visits of some church people, and we could not proceed with with the introduction of the rewards, and then it was too late because students were not at school anymore. So two schools who were supposed to receive the treatment did not receive this reputational treatment, which may end up into it's called instead of average treatment effect, I should talk about intention to treat effect. So what I do two-stage least squared. Okay, so I just tell Stata, okay, this was original randomization, this is how actually was the final randomization, and please adjust for this difference. And since none of those headmasters were told in advance that they were supposed to be in this reputational group, I think there should not be any difference, right? Because they did not really change their expectation because they didn't know about it, or it was only me. And as I can show you in the next slide, it is actually the case that there is no difference. And then this non-random attrition, I also check with using inverse probability weighting, which is just OLS, but I'm using different weights for those who have higher probability to drop out compared to those who have a lower probability to drop out. So these are the other specification, and you can see that the effects really of the treatment 1, which is the small feedback group, are around 0.1 standard deviation. Treatment 2, which is big feedback group, the effect is ranging from 0.9 to 0.12 standard deviation. I have to admit that I have not really checked whether this is significantly different or not, but the other results are definitely not statistically different. Then financial reward. Here you can see that if there was any change, then it was upward. So if there were if I'm talking about OLS results, then I should consider it as a lower bound, because, for example, inverted probability weighting shows me that financial reward actually had much stronger effect. And so that like differences in differences, I also did differences in differences. And all of these measures actually tell me that OLS is the lower bound, and the same holds for the reputational rewards. This is for mathematics, and for English is the similar story, that only financial reward actually overall play a role. So this, I don't think I'm going to bother you with this. This is the same story, just to show and to provide you with all different specification. So if I talk about what my experiment, or what I have found so far, is that girls seem to improve mainly when they are given feedback, and the effect size is approximately 0.1 to 0.15 standard deviation, which is compared to Andrabi et al. Very similar result. Boys seem to improve only when they are rewarded. The effect size is approximately 0.17 to 0.2 standard deviation, which is slightly lower to what Blimpo 2014 found out. And there is no additional value of feedback for boys. And then I think that I will find more evidence and arguments in my further data that girls who react positively to feedback provision are simply losing interest in fighting more for better score in English because of the confrontation of what they expected compared to what they actually saw in the examination. And this is the same. And so what I plan to do next is that I'm putting together data on effort, happiness, stress, overconfidence, and on students' aspirations. And I want to see how those treatments actually influenced these measures, because it will give me more sort of like intuition what's behind. Okay, because learning outcomes are not the only outcomes of our existence, and I'm interested on this as well. Then I would like to study dynamics, what's happening inside of the groups, because those groups, small feedback groups, were they were constructed exogenously. So I told them with whom they are paired, grouped, and so I have a nice variation in the group composition. So I have all those boys, girls together, or only boys, only girls, of different ages, and also of different performance and abilities. So I will be able to see to study the dynamics, what's happening inside of the group. And then the third thing I would like to do is actually to see what is the effect. I will follow the Kruger 1999. What is the effect on percentile ranks? Because one thing is to talk about how scores improve, but the second one is to talk about how rank actually improved. So that's what I plan to do, and I'll be very happy to answer questions, comments.
Okay, so thank you very much. Any questions from the audience?
Yes. Dilara.
Okay, I can start. I have like several questions. The small one is about, maybe I've missed, whether students at each stage they knew that they would have any reward or something else.
No. No, it was only me. Not even my team members knew that we are going to introduce rewards, because I was so scared of information spillover. So no, only me.
Okay, and then. Also, maybe I've missed whether there are any difference between boys and girls from different families. I mean, rich and poor, or something else, or it's difficult to.
So I have this implementation stage took place in 2012, and I have collected or dedicated half year in 2011 to collect data. Detailed questionnaires about background of those students. So I have 60 questions about who their parents are, what is their wealth, what do they have at home, what do they do usually in their free time, what their self-esteem, and so on. I have this data. The thing is that I personally did not expect a 35% attrition between academic years. So those kids simply disappeared. So I definitely can build sort of like some profile for classes, or at least for some subsets of those students, and I can definitely build some story about whether wealth was the way how those students differ. But at the moment I do not have it. I mean, I have the data, but I...
Thank you.
Yes?
I have also the question about the financial stuff, because at the beginning you told the size of the reward, and can you just tell us what is the size? Can we somehow, I don't know, realize it in our money? For example, what is the size of the reward? And you also have different areas, and this area also can have different financial position, and maybe this you can use as an instrument for the financial position.
Yeah. So, thanks for the question. It's like definitely they differ. The areas differ. So the area, if you imagine that this is Uganda, if this is Uganda, here is the lake. This is Kenya, Ethiopia, I don't think so, Sudan, Congo, Rwanda, Tanzania, and there is lake. So this is Kampala, this is the capital city. And then we tested in this area. So I divided the sample, and there is Jinja. It's a main harbor, let's say. So there's a main road between these two towns. So what I did, I divided the sample into area that is closest to Kampala, area that is along the road, area that is here, but it's still close to the road, an area that is like, it's not in the water, but there is some area here which is very remote. It really, those people sometimes never even go out of their villages. So this is what I did at the beginning as a stratification, and that's what I hope that at least at the beginning control and treatment groups will be on average the same in terms of their wealth being, and that's why I did this at the beginning. So in the end, I do not think that it would be driven by their wealth, or the effect would be driven by whether they're coming from richer families or poorer families. Of course, 2,000 shilling is something that, as I told you, it's like 80 US cents in those days. Maybe it's like $1 now. So we're not, and what they can buy out of that is they can have really big lunch, or they can have 5 pencils, as I said, or this kind of, like actually they would get halfway between Kampala and Jinja on their like matatu if they go. So it's not for, yes, I mean, I will check whether the wealth background matters. I will definitely check, but I randomized the sample at the beginning, so I tried to rule out this, that it would be driving the results. Yes?
What's the gender ratio in the classes?
53% in the primary schools, 51% in secondary schools.
Okay,
so surprisingly, it was more girls than boys.
Okay, I see.
But it was declining. The older students were, less girls there were, because they get pregnant, they get married, and so on.
If you were to compare your results to the previous results in the literature, so in the particular setting where people look at educational outcomes and how the comparison effect relative rankings, the information on these relative rankings influence performance. Did anyone else look at the combination of this information about the social, test score ranking and the financial rewards?
That's what I think it would be a novelty of mine.
Oh.
I have not really seen the composites into these two.
Okay.
Usually you saw that they provide them with feedback, but no additional rewards. So that's what I think. Of course, I am not aware of all the literature and I'm working on that, but I think this is going to be the contribution. And if you ask about some policy implication, it's hard to say at this moment, because so yes, I would confirm the social comparison theory that feedback matters, but if those people are more interested in how to keep girls at schools and how to keep them motivated, then I would suggest that feedback is an important thing. But otherwise, if it should be some policy on regional level, then it's a discussable, right? Because should we introduce feedback? Should we introduce the rewards for boys so that they also improve or not? It's always a question, like how sustainable financial rewards are. So that was like my whole research at the beginning was driven by the fact that if feedback is something that can improve their performance, that it's very easy to be implemented on a regional level, right? Because of course, it's always different if a teacher is implementing it or if an external person is implementing it. But even at the like they have some sort of committees, educational committees at regional level, even if they would really spend some money and effort on that, they would be able to implement it. But so, I mean, possibly it would have to be re-implement it, to do some follow-up study, maybe to include teachers and to teach teachers how to implement this in the classrooms and observe whether it would deliver the same effects, this feedback, or not. It's like a limited amount, like the policy implication. And yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question. You mentioned something you wanted to present, but it is beyond your today's presentation. The kind of mechanisms you analyze, or the link between incentives and outcomes. So maybe you can say more about that. So
what I meant was that at the particular moment I only know how those treatments improved performance, and I will have additional data, like other than learning outcomes, such as effort, overconfidence, happiness, subjective happiness, and stress and aspiration. So I will be able to see whether there are other effects, like possible, like did they really spend less effort in English? So I will be able to support my argument that I provided you that feedback had short-lasting effects. Or I would see whether what is happening with the overconfident. I mean, majority of kids are overconfident in my sample, and it could be because teachers are giving them incorrect feedback, because they may have also make mistakes in the evaluation of the exams they are taking with them, or simply they are in favor of some students compared to others. So what I wanted to say is that this information, this additional information on overconfidence will tell me whether the gap between what they expected and what they really got lowered, for example, over time or not. And this would tell me first whether there is some learning effect on who they are, and what is the effect actually, how does it transmit into learning outcomes, and so on. So I think this additional data will provide me for more intuition, what is really behind, not these treatment effects.
And another question is about the financial incentives. Do you know any examples of such practices introduced in other contexts or in schools, that pupils are motivated by financial incentives? There are, we call it Olympiadas, like some sort of like competition. So this introduction of these rewards is actually introducing some sort of competitive environment between students. And in developed countries, we face competition very often. In developing countries, the only sort of competition they face is when they take this national examination. Otherwise, no. When they get money, I mean.
And monetary rewards.
In countries, they can get some money for different achievements, or how does it work?
Yeah, I mean.
Because I don't know.
Yeah, in the literature, it's always a question like, should we motivate kids by money? Like, it could be also parents, right? Do you give pocket money to your kids if they bring you nice result from schools or not? I remember my parents, they were always like telling me, well, we can give you some extra pocket money if you bring us all A's in your what is it called, certificate at the end of the school year. So this research on incentives is driven not only by policy implementation, but also like what are we facing in real life. Should you give congratulatory card? Is it enough to motivate students to perform better or not? I mean, we have so many competitions, like imagine from childhood, in the kindergartens, there's so many competitive environments, and you always get diploma or this medal, right? So there's extensive literature what we should give to people to motivate, not only students. It's as I said, it's in firm environment, extensively tested. Is it just a piece of paper that I tell you, I write you thank you? So there's this research that actually studied that this is going to improve the performance as well, right? Just to give some status or some sort of like non-financial reputational reward can lead to improvement as well. So we face these situations not only as a policymakers, but also in the real life. So that's where.
Yeah, but there are probably different contexts.
Sure.
So, you give examples from family context, and it is a different kind of relationship. And if you speak about the school context, it is a different environment.
Mm-hmm. And so this is like mostly, are there any school competitions? In my hometown, we had always some school competitions in math, in physics.
And you got money
in
as a reward.
There were either financial rewards, like some small amount, or for example, now there was if you do research, right? Now there has been call for GDN grant competitions, so you just write proposal and you get a really big amount of money, either for another research or for follow-up of your research and so on. Should they give this, or should they give you just some congratulatory card of the president of whatever?
Children are eligible for this kind of grants.
No, this I was talking that this is in the context of the PhD students or so in different stages, of course, you have different competitions. And what I want to say, in educational system, you really often face different competitions, also rewarded financially, also rewarded reputationally, and the overall research is like, what should we push for? What is better for kids?
So what was the before you start this field experiment, what was the degree of information students had on their relative performance? None or some?
So I would say that in better schools they are also better informed, and in worse schools they lack information sometimes. They sometimes get only once a year sort of certificate, even with delay, which is evaluated by teachers who do not really know how to calculate some correct answer. So it's questionable also to what extent it is true what they receive. So yes, there would be a question, is there any interaction of this, could this result be driven just by introduction of this pure information or not? I would say there could be, and I have a limited amount of ability to distinguish.
But you stratify by school
I stratify, yes.
quality. So
that
part of it
is like, I expect that in treatment and control groups, schools of different information quality are randomized equally, so then in the end this effect should not play a role. But the question is if there is any addition, like value added or additive.
You can look at it, no? I mean, you can compare high quality schools and compare the gap between treatment and control and see.
That actually I didn't do so far, that I can do.
Because if you already have some information about relative standing, some incentives, right?
It can definitely it can boost the effect differently, right? So the slope can be different.
Yeah, that could be an interesting thing to look at.
I actually have like very weird data on whether they had some sort of like exercise book with some sort of scores in their classes or not. But it's just for my possibly interest, because it was not really nicely systematically. Sometimes they told me, well, yes, the teacher who has it is coming. When is he coming? Well, tomorrow. Can I come tomorrow to get the data? Well, maybe not tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and so on. So this kind of, But I will definitely check this, because it's,
And one more question. I was just wondering, well, you said that nobody knew about the kind of rewards the children will be given. But on the other hand, I was also wondering about the parents and their permission, because if I'm a parent and I know I get a financial reward within some experiment, well, maybe it is not the kind of reward I will accept. Well, it depends on the parent. So.
And that's why I did it in Uganda, because there is the headmaster who makes the decision. So I eliminated the self-selection by parents. If I did the same experiment in developed country, I of course would have to ask for permission of all parents. And of course there would be self-selection, who agrees and who does not agree. There I had the permission of a headmaster who is in charge in all decisions. So that was also partially a reason why to go to developing country to do that. Of course we can discuss
Ethics is that of your country where you are doing research, or you applying the research ethics of Uganda, or how does it work? Yes, legal
well, I did not really had any written permission from Czech Republic, but I cooperated with an NGO that is operating in the area, and I had a confirmation from them that this is okay, and also I had permission from the headmasters, and I said, as I told you, I mean, headmaster is above all the parents. So once I had this permission, I think I was in a safe side.
So do you think that some schools or headmasters, when they were approached by you, you know, okay, I'm going to do this experiment, did they, you know, ever state their concern that perhaps introducing some more information about the relative standings may discourage some kids? Like, this information may actually lead them to drop out of school because they find, you know, like the guys in the lower percentiles, they maybe overestimate their relative standing before you introduce this program, right? So do you think that this attrition thing might be actually an outcome of the experiment itself?
I think it is an outcome, and there are two things that I want to say. So one is that there are two different types of schools: private and public schools. And of course, for private schools, the channel would be possibly different because they have to pay school fees. And of course, if I demotivate students from coming to these private schools, it may have fatal consequences of their existence. So I would not ever be able to distinguish whether it was an effect or channel through the headmaster, through teachers, or through children themselves. Unfortunately, there was no other way how to introduce other treatments or how to check what is the channel. So that I do not know, but I think in general that it is an effect of the treatment on the attrition. And I'm going to definitely look at the differences by public versus private schools. Maybe if I see in private schools that the motivation is higher, but you know, it's always endogenous, right? Because who is coming to private school, who's coming to public school, and so on. Right. So the only thing I can say whether these there are differences, but I would not be able to distinguish them. I mean, you wanted to ask, yeah?
I also have a small question. We have already discussed it several months ago, but I'm going to take into consideration the social environment of the student because you have data about it.
Yeah, I mean, I have very good data for this networking stuff, and we definitely can talk about that because so I have data on their friends and on who do they think the idol is. So I can see whom did they pick in 2011, even though that I think is not going to be very useful data. But from the 2012, since I started the baseline survey until I gave them last piece of treatment, so I collected the information on their friends at the beginning and at the end. So I can see whether there is some, whether students facing this small competition, whether they responded, whether they created new friends according to the study group or not. Whether there were any, I can actually study also the degree of friendship within each study group, whether it played a role in terms of feedback or not. But that's definitely we can discuss. I mean, I have data on that. They're in terrible stage because you can imagine that you have to pair all names from the questionnaires with existing names in your data set, and some of the names are just not easy to read. Sometimes they gave only first names and so on. So data are not in the best shape at the moment, but definitely it's an interesting thing to discuss later.
Any more questions?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still trying to think about why it is sort of important to actually form groups. Like when you think about treatment one, right? So you're not only releasing information about each student's position in the class, but you're actually
group position.
Yes, so you're limiting the information in a sense, but at the same time you're introducing social pressure type of thing. I mean, because poor performing students are exposed to their group members, right?
So I think it's going to be very interesting to look what is really going on inside of the group. So I may have a person, and this is called, I think, big fish in a small pond and small fish in a big pond, whatever. So I can be among poorest performers, but within my group I can be the star. So that could be that could have some different motivation power compared to being like 10th in the class, like being among the best performers, and then all of a sudden you see I'm the worst within my class. So that is something is going to be very interesting to look at. And then the group, so there is definitely monitoring effect. So there is a question, of course, whether those kids feel at least sort of some responsibility. If in general Ugandans are irresponsible, like they do not take it seriously, then of course this information about how am I doing compared to others should not play a role. But if I feel responsible for our group outcome, and especially when it's specifically mentioned in the card, in the report card, then it should be a motivator itself. So there's sort of like a peer effects combination with monitoring going on, and unfortunately I do not have the design so that I can combine the feedback individual versus feedback group. I chose groups because in research group outcomes were usually giving positive results, like meaning that they were really motivating. If you're grouped, usually it led to some sort of improvement of the group outcome. But on that I have to elaborate more.
And okay. And so there are several groups within a class, right? In
yes.
Student 1. Do all groups know each other?
I mean, yes, we are in P6 and P. So there is limited amount of like how well they know in senior 1, because at the beginning of the school year they are newly built classroom, but otherwise they have been together for many years. And
no, what I meant is that as a person in the class, do I know everyone? Like, do I know which group to which group each?
Like how we are grouped? No. So you know only who is your group. This is your group. And then you know only that other groups, how they are ranking. I do not reveal that this is Eren, Dasha and Ekim, right? I only say that, okay, this is my group and we are here. Because otherwise, imagine that we have like 60 groups. No, 60 will be too much. But 120 was the maximum amount, the size of the classroom. And then you have like 40 groups, and I would not be able to give them information who is grouped with whom. Of course they talk, and once I gave them, I left these papers with them, so they could talk, and definitely among their peers, among their friendships, friends, they spread the information. So I think to a certain extent, they in smaller groups, smaller classes, I think they would figure out who is grouped with whom. And in bigger one, probably just in some circle. Around them.
As a group, do I know how the other groups in my class is ranked?
You only know the distribution, so you do not know whether. So if I have a friend in a second group, by looking at this, I do not know whether he scored here or somewhere. I only know how my group. So if we are 10 groups, you have 10 bars. And then you only know that you are second, but you do not know who exactly is.
What is what?
What is what? No, you do not know.
Okay, because that, in a sense, limits the social. Like, I feel like if you had given that information as well, then
there's just a pressure coming from within this group.
Okay.
Because if I'm grouped with someone who is the best performer, and I'm like medium performer, I may feel pressure from him, so that if I screw, you know, our group average goes down.
But why do I care about my group average?
That's the question.
If people are not going to, other groups may not be able to judge me.
Because we are competitive.
Yeah. Okay.
And this competition is more pronounced if I introduce rewards.
Okay.
So, I mean, the overall thing was like, kids are usually competitive, girls less than boys. Is this feedback about group outcomes going to lead to improvement just based on my assumption that they are competitive?
Okay, I see.
I mean, that was the driving force.
Any more questions?
Yes?
I have a small question about the English test. Why did you decide to make test in English? Because I'm sure that math is a very important subject for them, but I'm not sure about English.
So English is an official language in Uganda. I mean, otherwise you have 50-something languages, tribal languages, and English is language of the national examinations. So that's why I picked English. And math, yes, it is important, but all of them are scared of math because, yeah, even I think there is very poor background in mathematics. So I chose these two, first of all, because they were common in both math, primary and secondary schools, and also because English, math, I was scared that they're not really going to fight to improve because they're overall skeptical about math. They always choose art and compared to science in further study. So that's why I picked these two.
Any more questions? Okay, no, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.